Hi, welcome to the Peak Performance Podcast. My name is Brad Young, and today we're going to be going over unlocking growth through self awareness. And self awareness is going to be a real foundation to gain as we're going through the series. I mean, to achieve your peak performance, you have to be self aware. Because this is one of your biggest opportunities to grow. And I'll tell you why. Only 10 to 15% of people are fully self aware. All right. So chances are, you're in that 85 to 90%. It's not. Most people are not self aware, obviously, when only 10 to 15% are. And self awareness is it's a judgment thing too, but I have attached there's a questionnaire. It's attached to the podcast, the link, you have access to it. And, it goes through a lot of questions to help with this self-awareness. So we're going to go through this here in just a few minutes. I'm going to go through a few things and we're going to go through the questionnaire, and that's going to be it. I'm not going to keep, make this a really long podcast, but at the same time, you got to think about self-awareness as an opportunity, because with all those people that are not self-aware, you got to ask yourself, are you self-aware? I guess a good example today, I went to run, and I'm doing heart rate training right now, getting ready for some events. And so I'm not running fast. When you're heart rate training, you're building that foundation. You're staying in zone 2. And so every time my heart rate gets out of zone 2, I had to slow back down. Well, what happens over the course after the first hour, my heart rate starts going down. And so I know it's working. And so my heart rate starts going down, but my speed starts to increase. And so it continually does that when I'm doing the heart rate training, continually when I'm getting ready for something. And so you have to be truly self-aware when you're doing that, because, you have to pay attention to everything. You have to be aware of what your body's doing, at what speed, at what effort. You got to make sure that, you're not breathing hard. You got to make sure your heart rate, like I said, I get notifications every time my heart rate gets out of zone 2, and I'll slow back down, or I'll figure out what's going on. And so, you have to be so self-aware to be able to heart rate train. But there's so many other things in life that we have to be self-aware of, and we neglect, our health and everything else. And so we're going to go through that. But, self-awareness is important. It's one of the largest opportunities for anybody to grow your health and fitness. And that's what this is all about, is growing your health and fitness, and, your mental resilience, your mental strength, and growing your mental health. But when we look at self-awareness, why does it matter? It's your superpower. It's your ability to truly understand yourself, to understand your emotions, your thoughts, your actions, and how they shape the world around you, because we don't know sometimes. It's kind of like, I was doing a decent bit of weight the other day in the gym. All right. It was hammer strength. So it's not, anything life changing, but I mean, it was, 375 pounds or so. And I did it like 42 times. And these kids, it's like, after I did that, I wasn't grunting or making any kind of noise or doing anything like that. 'Cause, I mean, that's okay. It was like it was my third round. So I was actually tired, but I was not self-aware of how I move, because I move really fast when I'm doing my high intensity training, because I'm very intense. And so what I didn't get is, they thought I was, based on my actions and the way I come through, they thought I was trying to, I guess they thought I was trying to bully them or something. They're all bigger than I am. I'm only 205 pounds. I mean, they're all like, way bigger than me, but they all kind of freaked out, and it's like they all banded together like I was trying to. I wouldn't do it. I was just doing my workout, but I was not self-aware. And I'm bad about that. I'm not self-aware of the way I move and do things sometimes, when I'm in the gym, when I'm going, I have to think about that, because I guess I scared them a little bit. I didn't mean to, I seen this old guy do it that many times, and and I could still do 225. He's flat, but I still do it 31, 32 times or more, probably 35. But, which is, just like NFL offensive lineman. I'm 205 pounds, but I don't do it to, I wasn't trying to intimidate. I wasn't trying to do anything, but the way I was moving, I was not self-aware of how I was moving, because they wouldn't have reacted the same way. This has happened before. I'm completely, I have to work on that. I got to be more self-aware of how I'm going through. I try to get out of everybody's way and be nice and polite and everything else. But, sometimes I don't see you or whatever. So, it's a good lesson for all of us, because self-awareness, you have to be self-aware as far as your health, your fitness level. We're going to go over that. But, you also got to be your mental health, what you're putting out, because you may not realize it. I had no idea. I mean, I get, like I said, I must have scared them or something. And so, when you look at self-awareness, it's about uncovering your strengths and acknowledging your challenges or your weaknesses. I mean, I say challenges, but your weaknesses. You need to know what you're good at and what you're bad at. And sometimes we don't even know. We really don't know. But self-awareness is a foundation and the first step to meaningful transformation. When we tap into our self-awareness, you can unlock the potential to grow, change, and take control of the journey. When you look at self-awareness is an internal compass. It's guiding you towards greatness, or it's guiding you towards failure. See, this is why the 10 to 15% matters, because most people are not self-aware. Their internal compass is guiding them to wherever they're at. Just like when I hear people talk about all these toxic relationships. Well, guess what? Your internal compass led you there. So it's something about you too, and your judgment. You're not being fully aware of yourself. And that's why that's why I have surveys and things like this, so we can look at it and become more self-aware. Be aware of your body language. That's another one, because I'm really, really aware of people's body language. And, I'm very, very, very aware of people's body language. And so when I'm talking to people, I look at the body language, I see people walking, all those things, I'm very aware of that. But I'm not aware of my own sometimes, just like what happened, and it's happened in other areas too. And I just don't realize it. So you have to work on it, because, self-awareness can guide you towards greatness, but you have to understand what it is and how to use it, because self-awareness is going to build emotional control and adaptability, and adaptability is something that I've talked about in multiple books. I mean, it's one of the biggest traits, for people that are successful, in anything. I mean, whether you want to be successful with your health, your fitness, your nutrition, whatever you're looking to be successful at, you gotta be adaptable, because, one way doesn't get it. One diet's not gonna do it. You need to diet for whatever you're training for. Too many people try one diet and they try to train for other things, and that's not going to be it. It's like getting ready for a bodybuilding competition. You got 12 weeks to cut, and your calories get down ridiculously low, and starving, drinking all that water and just starving and weak, feel terrible and stuff. And you have to be so self-aware, because I used to work out with a lot of people that were doing competitions, some IBF pros, and one of them actually he was like top 5 in the Mr. Olympia. They may have won it, but anyway, the thing of it is the one that was great, the one that was in the Olympia, was self-aware, understood it. He understood how to adapt. He understood how to control himself. And so that's what you got to think about that too. Like, when you're trying to cut and diet, can you emotionally control yourself from eating eating everything in the house? Think things about that. So, you got to think about that when you're in self-awareness. You got to be self-aware. That's why we're going to go through this, and it's going to make more sense when we get to the questionnaire. But but when you embrace self-awareness, everything's going to shift. Your decisions get sharper and better. your emotional intelligence grows, and everything flourishes because you understand yourself. This is the whole point. I mean, people don't understand themselves, and so you know it's like somebody, like our New Year's Eve or New Year's Day gym people. They're not self-aware at all. They hadn't worked out in 10, 15 years, and most of the time they come in and hurt themselves and fail because they are completely unself-aware. All of a sudden you got to understand. So guess what? I'm 40. I'm not 25 anymore. I have to work out differently. And I promise you, I'm 47 and I have to work out much differently than I did. I have to eat so much better. I can't get away with, guzzling alcohol and eating chicken wings all the time. You just can't get away with that and maintain any high level of, being in shape. You have to change, as your body changes, as you get older, you have to adapt. And that's what self-awareness is about, being able to adapt and become more self-aware. And so there's a lot of barriers. I'm going to go through a few of these barriers real quick, and then we're going to go to the questionnaire. So common barriers to self-awareness. Fear of uncomfortable truths about yourself. And this is a biggie because people they're not comfortable confronting themselves about what they have to realize is true. So that's what we're going to look at in a minute, because, you got to confront yourself. You got to decide, it's like today, I'm wanting to run a 24-hour race, but I'm like, man, I do not feel ready. So that's an uncomfortable truth. I have not been able to train like I needed to for multiple reasons, and there are no excuses, but I've not been able to train like I need to, and I have not, and I've got a little less than a month to get ready. So we'll see. I'm going to do everything. But I got to be self-aware because I don't want to get hurt. That's the thing about, you got to be self-aware and smart about how you do it. You want to push yourself, but there's plenty of other ones that I can enter. So we'll see how that goes. But that's a barrier. It's a huge barrier to being self-aware, because you got to understand that uncomfortable truth that what's going to happen, when this happens. People they don't put enough time into introspection and reflection. They don't take enough time to reflect and understand themselves. You got to do that, and that's what we're going to do in a minute. We're going to go through some of the questions, and it's really going to help, because if you don't spend the time trying to understand yourself, you'll never figure yourself out. As you can see, only, there's 85 to 90% of people are not fully aware of themselves. People are over reliant on external validation versus then internal assessments. And that's so true. People, they want external validation rather than looking into, inside. It's like people, they'll post something and they'll get all these likes. And so instead of looking inside and saying, okay, do I have what it takes to get to that next level? They're getting all that external validation, and they're like, yeah, I'm gonna get to this next level. But you better look inside and make sure that you're ready, because people lead you down a bad road. They'll lead you down the wrong road, because you got to look internally. People have difficulty in separating their emotions from objective self-evaluation. They get too sensitive about, separating your emotions from objectively evaluating yourself. You got to take the emotion out of your decisions. You got to look at things, and just like today, I had to think about it. It's freezing. It's literally freezing, and it was raining pretty hard the last few miles, and I had to really think about it. I'm like, am I really ready? Am I ready for 24 hours of this? Because I'm trying to do a walk-run combination for the event, but today I was running. And I was heart rate training. I got to do this heart rate training. I've got speed days, and I'm going to have, days that I'm going to be running, 4 to 6, 8 hours at a time, trying to find the right rhythm to keep from hurting myself. And so, so we had to figure those things out. And on top of it, it's wintertime, it's February. So it's wonderful. So, and people have a resistance to change or fear of stepping out of your own comfort zone. And so that's it. That's it. You don't want to step out. So how do we solve these things? What do we do? Well, we become more self-aware. So now I'm going to go through it's personal evaluation. It's in the description. It's in the podcast description. And so now we're going to look at it. And also there's a disclaimer on it. The opinions shared on this podcast are for informational purposes only, are not intended to diagnose, treat, or cure any medical conditions. And so that is true. All rights reserved. Brad Young. I'm the owner of all this. So what we're going to go through quickly, because I want you to download this and take it. I want you to, follow the link. It's published, and then do a personal evaluation on yourself, because, you've got to become more self-aware to grow. So it's personal things. It's like, what's your current height and weight? And have these measurements changed recently? What's your resting heart rate? And are you monitoring it regularly? See, self-awareness. How many hours of sleep do you typically get per night? You feel well rested upon waking. See, now that's a key right there. And I check that at my watch. It keeps up my sleep every night. And I have sleep apnea, but it's down to mild now. That's right. On top of all the other things I have to deal with being 47, I've still got sleep apnea, but it's improved with the surgery and and all the running and everything. But it's a physical thing. It's not, it's not something I could do anything about outside of, more surgeries and things like that. No matter, I could lose 100 pounds and it wouldn't make any difference. But are there any recurring physical ailments or injuries that affect your performance? And then what are your short-term, long-term health goals and how they align with your lifestyle? So that's half of the ones in health. And so I think you get the drift here, that this is personal. This is, a true self-evaluation. I'm telling you, we've got to go through and if you're going to unlock growth, you got to be self-aware of what these things are, what these measurements are. What are your current maximum weights for the following exercises? So I just put the bench press, the deadlift, and squats in there. Your current max, your goal max, but there's plenty of other lifts and things like that. The CrossFit people do all kinds of different lifts and stuff, but, write it down, write down what your max is, what you want to be, because again, you got to be self-aware, because if you don't write the goal down, you really don't have one. How would you rate your flexibility on a scale of 1 to 10? See, now you're getting into real stuff right there, because that flexibility is going to lead to way more success. What are your best time for running distances such as a mile, 5 kilometers, 10 kilometers? What are they? What's your 5K time? What's your 10K time? Boom. Do you have goals related to running these? And so there's plenty of more questions on the fitness side. Then you got diet, nutrition. Are you currently tracking your macros? And what method are you using? What are your specific, macro goals and how they align with your fitness objectives? These are, like I said, these are truly questions that, to see how self-aware you really are. Can you provide details of your typical daily diet? What foods make up the majority of your meals and snacks? And for me, it's chicken, quinoa, and rice. And then it's more chicken, quinoa, and rice. How does your current, and I have to change it up. I have to change it for different events and different things I do, because I'm planning on doing a bunch of things this year. But how does your current dietary intake align with the energy and nutrients needed to support your fitness goals? And see, this is a big one. This is where I slip up all the time and don't get enough calories in. I may burn 2,000 calories of exercise calories a day or more, which would make me need like 5,000 calories that day. And I don't get it. It's hard to get that many in, but that's not an excuse. And so this is where, you got to really get deep into it. You need to be completely aware of what you're doing. Now we get to mental health. How would you describe your current mental health and emotional well-being? Are there specific stressors? How do you manage stress? This is, getting into your mental health, and, we got to figure that out because, it's gonna directly affect your fitness. Mental toughness, how do you find, how do you define mental toughness in your own life, and what does it mean to you personally? Ooh, that's a question. See, now, I mean, like I said, this is a get real questionnaire here. This is a get real one. What does it mean to you? Can you recall a specific situation where you demonstrated resilience and mental toughness? What contributed to ability to persevere? How do you typically respond when faced with significant challenges or setbacks? Do you suck it up or not? You suck it up and keep going, or do you quit? Learning and personal growth. When was the last time you actually pursued learning a new skill or subject? What was it, and what inspired you? Then I go through goals and all those things. But, like I said, there's a lot in here. And then we talk about, what sports do you regularly, participate in? Have you entered any sporting competitions? Yada yada. And this is a true, self-awareness test. And so, I really hope that after you get through listening, you would download this and just follow the link to it. You can print it out or whatever. I mean, I own the rights to it, but you can, print it out, write on it, or answer the question somehow. And I'm gonna, at some point, I'm gonna get an app for this to where, we can just put all these things in here, because it's really important to be able to track all these things so we can be self-aware, because we're getting ready to get in next, start looking at training methods. And so we're going to start looking at training methods of your athletes. We're going to look and see what makes them tick, and go from there, because now that we have we went through these things, now we're self-aware,